Welcome, friends, to the First Unitarian Society. I am Kelly Asbruth Jackson, one of the ministers here. My colleague Kelly Crocker and I are joined today by Drew Collins, Linda Warren, Heather Thorpe, and Daniel Carnes. Here in this community, we gather to grow our souls, connect with one another, and embody our UU values in our lives, our community, and our world. We want to remind you to keep your mask on at all times and ask that you do not sing during the hymns. Please feel free to hum along. Immediately following the postlude, we ask you to help us keep everyone as safe as possible by not lingering here in the atrium or the building. You are welcome and invited to socialize outside. I invite you now to take a few deep breaths and to be present here together, to bring ourselves fully into this time we share in a spirit of deep gratitude for the gifts of this community. Whatever you have come in anticipating, whatever you expect or worry for our world, for the future, for our lives, let it go.
Make space in your heart to be surprised. Make room in your soul for a new story to take shape. Let astonishment be possible at this life that remains a miracle. Imagine here the bursting of joy.
Relentless and resilient, coming in waves, washing over us with music and story, silence and still, this dreaming together.
Being hope for each other and courage to believe in this new day dawning for us all.
Come, let us worship together. And now I invite you, if you would like, to light a chalice or candle in your own home and to join me in these words for the chalice lighting. May this flame cast its light toward the coming days, reminding us that the future is not simply a place we are going, but a place we are creating. The path of new possibilities will not be found, but made. A new world is waiting to be built. May our time together light the way.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Our opening hymn is 298, Wake Now My Senses. Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being. completion your vow, giving, receiving, as love shows us how. Wake now, my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take all your neighbor, both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now, my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Make now my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
Before we start our story today of Rosie Revere, I have a question for all of you, grown-ups too. How many of you have ever felt like you did something that failed? Raise your hand if that's true. Ooh, pretty much everybody. Now, second question. Raise your hand if you let that failure or that sense of not doing it right stop you. No one. That's our story today about Rosie Revere. We'll see what happens. This is the story of Rosie Revere, who dreamed of becoming a great engineer. In Lila Greer's classroom at Blue River Creek, young Rosie sat shyly, not daring to speak. But when no one saw her, she peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer's stash. And late at night, Rosie rolled up her sleeves and built in her hideaway under the eaves. Alone in the attic, the moon high above, dear Rosie made gadgets and gizmos she loved. And when she grew sleepy, she hid her machines far under the bed where they'd never be seen. When Rosie was young, she had not been so shy. She worked with her hair swooping over one eye and made fine inventions for uncles and aunts, a hot dog dispenser and helium pants. The uncle she loved most was zookeeper Fred. She made him a hat to keep snakes off his head from parts of a fan and some cheddar cheese spray, which everyone knows keeps the pythons away. And when it was finished, young Rosie was proud, but Fred slapped his knee and he chuckled out loud. He laughed till he wheezed and his eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who stood there embarrassed, perplexed, and dismayed. She looked at the cheese hat and then looked away. "I love it," Fred hooted. "Oh, truly I do." But Rosie Revere knew that could not be true. She stuck the cheese hat on the back of her shelf and after that day kept her dreams to herself. And that's how it went until one autumn day, her oldest relation showed up for a stay. Her great-great-aunt Rose was a true dynamo who'd worked building airplanes a long time ago. She told Rosie tales of the things she had done and goals she had checked off her list one by one. She gave a sad smile as she looked to the sky. "The only thrill left on my list is to fly. But time never lingers as long as it seems. I'll chalk that one up to an old lady's dreams." That night, as Rosie lay wide-eyed in bed, a daring idea crept into her head. Could she build a gizmo to help her aunt fly? She looked at the cheese hat and said, "No, not I." But questions are tricky, and some hold on tight, and this one kept Rosie awake through the night. So when dawn approached and red streaks lit the sky, young Rosie knew just how to make her aunt fly. She worked and she worked till the day was half gone, then hauled her cheese copter out onto the lawn to give her invention a test just to see the ridiculous flop it might turn out to be. Strapped into the cockpit, she flipped on the switch. The hella cheese copter sputtered and twitched. It floated a moment and whirled round and round, then froze for a heartbeat and crashed to the ground. Then Rosie heard laughter and turned round to see her great aunt was laughing and slapping her knee. She laughed till she wheezed and her eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who thought, "Oh no, never, not ever again will I try to build something to sputter or spin or build with a lever, a switch, or a gear, and never will I be a great engineer." She turned round to leave, but then great-great-aunt Rose grabbed hold of young Rosie and pulled her in close and hugged her and kissed her and started to cry. "You did it! Hooray! It's the perfect first try. This great flop is over. It's time for the next." Young Rosie was baffled, embarrassed, perplexed. "I failed," said dear Rosie. "It's just made of trash." "Didn't you see it? The cheese copter crashed." "Yes," said her great aunt, "it crashed. That is true. But first it did just what it needed to do. Before it crashed, Rosie, before that, it flew. Your brilliant first flop was a raging success. Come on, let's get busy and on to the next." She handed a notebook to Rosie Revere, who smiled at her aunt as it all became clear. Life might have its failures, but this was not it. The only true failure can come if you quit. They worked till the sun sneaked away to its bed. Aunt Rose tied her headscarf around Rosie's head and sent her to sleep with a smile ear to ear to dream the bold dreams of a great engineer. Now at Blue River Creek, all the kids in grade 2 build gizmos and gadgets and doohickeys too. With each perfect failure, they all stand and cheer, but none quite as proudly as Rosie Revere.
I invite you now into this time of giving and receiving, where we give freely and generously to this offering which sustains and strengthens our community here, and also our outreach offering recipient, who this week is the United Muslim Resettlement Council, a newly formed alliance of masjids and other Islamic organizations in Wisconsin working to assist refugees newly arrived from Afghanistan. These folks, whose lives were under threat in their home nation, largely because of their support for the United States over the past 20 years, and for their personal commitment to democracy and the rights of women. Over the past month, many of you have reached out looking for ways to help our newly arrived neighbors, and the United Muslim Resettlement Council is one of the regional organizations now working to provide direct, culturally sensitive assistance to folks now facing a profoundly uncertain future. There are multiple ways to share your gifts today. Baskets at the door for your gifts on your way out of the service, or as you will see on the screen, that you can donate directly from our website, fusmadison.org, and you will see also our text to give information there as well. We thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we create together.
For over 20 years now, my mother has been writing letters to a dear friend, written on plain old notebook paper or fancy stationery that contains notes in the margins such as, "Isn't this one beautiful? I knew I had to save it and send it to you." These letters have become their ritual of connection, their way of staying engaged in one another's lives, the place where they share both the daily happenings and also where they mark the larger moments of great significance, moments of joy and times of loss. When I began to reflect on the growing edge and the words of the civil rights leader and theologian Howard Thurman in preparation for today's reflections, I realized that what I really wanted to do, needed to do maybe, was write you all a letter. So here it is. Dear friends, in these days of so much ambiguity and unknowing, when we find ourselves caught between the hope of returning to one another and two pieces of life that we have missed and the uncertainty of what is to come, I keep thinking about Howard Thurman's concept of the growing edge. Do you know this one? Look well to the growing edge, he says. All around us, worlds are dying and new worlds are being born. All around us, life is dying and life is being born. The fruit ripens on the tree. The roots are silently at work in the darkness of the earth against a time when there shall be new leaves, fresh blossoms, green fruit. Such is the growing edge. It is the extra breath from the exhausted lung, the one more thing to try when all else has failed, the upward reach of life when weariness closes in upon all endeavor. This is the basis of hope in moments of despair, the incentive to carry on, the source of confidence when worlds crash and dreams whiten into ash. We would do well then to look to the growing edge. It seems to me that most of our days, especially these days, are lived on the growing edge, in this place that is an endless dance of shadow and light, hope and grief. When we are on the growing edge, the veil of normal life is lifted many times against our will, and we need to cobble together a new life from the pieces. I have been watching over the past few months, and what I see is you living on the growing edge, and I see how your heart is being shaped in the process. This growing edge is causing you to question your decisions, your next steps, and this makes sense because growing edges are places that frighten us, times when we take risks, when we question whether or not we are enough to do this hard thing. This is not a comfortable place. Yet Thurman asks us to have courage, because growth is happening whether we see it or not. I have seen you find strength you didn't know you had. I've seen you hold a belief fiercer than you ever could have imagined. And I've seen you discover a love deeper than you had ever known. Growing edges can be places of despair, and yet they hold so much possibility for new life. Did I ever tell you about the teacher I had in college who used to yell from the front of the room, "Ask what's possible, not what's wrong"? Dr. Tancredi was his name, and if you knew him, you wouldn't forget him either. This was an abnormal psychology class, and we entered each day expecting to learn how to diagnose and treat ailments of all sorts. He would tell us a story about a person and their struggles, and we were to talk through how we would treat them. Out would come the DSM-4, and we would begin looking up all the names we would use to describe what was wrong. After we did this, he would yell, "And now you have a person in front of you who did not come to see you for a diagnosis. They came to you for hope. If you just tell them what's wrong, you leave them in despair. Work with them to discover what is possible, and you give them new life. Anyone can tell them what's wrong." I haven't thought about him and that question in years, and I suddenly appreciate his reframe more than ever. It would be a good conversation to have the next time we talk. What is it that seems possible for you? Where are you finding hope? Tell me that. We already have a list of so many things that are wrong. In fact, we have long lists of all that is wrong in the larger world as well. I just listened to Krista Tippett interview the Zen priest, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. And in that interview, she said, there is something dying in our society, in our culture, and there's something dying in us individually. And what is dying, I think, is the willingness to be in denial. And that is extraordinary. It's always been happening. And when it happens in enough of us, in a short enough period of time at the same time, then you have a tipping point and the culture begins to shift. It begins when we all realize that we have to face it. We have to see it all. We cannot have a healed society, she said. We cannot have change. We cannot have justice if we do not reclaim and repair the human spirit. We need to come to a deep knowing of who we are. That is how you bring down the systems of oppression. Those systems can't survive if enough of us set about the work of reclaiming the human spirit. Because in that work, we would reclaim the sense of humanity for all people. A deep knowing of who we are is the beginning of how we heal our world. We can no longer live in denial. That's a bold statement, and it's one that's resonating for me today. I wonder how it sits with you. In some ways, that feels like an incredibly overwhelming concept, and I have no idea where to begin. And then I think about it a bit more, and I hear in my head one word: stay. Just stay. Stay here with me in this uncomfortable place as we try to uncover who we are. How many teachers have I heard over the years say that spiritual practice is all about learning how to stay, to stop trying to outrun suffering, to stop using all our faculties to simply avoid pain and discomfort at all costs, and instead to turn our hearts to seeing what is here, to seeing all of life in all its flawed abundance. What a frightening idea. Sitting with the pain, feeling it all. Who would want to do that? And yet I know, and you do too, that the fear we don't acknowledge is still there, waiting for a moment to appear. And when it does, it can make us small, can make us shrink, can block the excitement of a new thing, can keep us from uncovering deep gladness. What kind of transformation might await us if we stop trying to outrun suffering and instead learn how to stay? How would this open us up to embracing possibility, to seeing what can be, who we can be, when we risk opening ourselves to all that life brings our way? I know what you're thinking. Simple to say, hard to do. And you're right. This life is very complicated. And I never told you any of this would be easy. Now, you know it wouldn't be a letter from me if I didn't include a poem or two. I found this one the other day, and it seems to just fit this moment. It's by Lynn Unger, and it's called Breathe. Breathe, said the wind. How can I breathe at a time like this, when the air is full of the smoke of burning forests and burning lives? Just breathe, the wind insisted. Easy for you to say, if the weight of injustice is not wrapped around your throat, cutting off all air. I need you to breathe, I need you to breathe. Don't tell me to be calm when there are so many reasons to be angry, so much cause for despair. I didn't say to be calm, said the wind. I said to breathe. We're going to need a lot of air to make this hurricane together. My dear one, how do we feel the fear? See the pain, sense the hope here on this edge, and do what needs to be done anyway. I've been meaning to tell you this story I heard the other day from a colleague. She was adopted at a very young age and never knew her biological mother. A few years ago, she went in search of her mother and learned that she had passed away. In her search, she discovered someone who was her mother's friend in their school years, and they struck up a correspondence, writing each other letters. And in her last letter, the friend wrote, "Your mother struggled so much in her life. Her days were hard, and she tried to protect herself from the pain as best she could. I will always remember the way she held her body. Her body always curved around her heart. She was literally protecting her heart from anything that could come her way. It kept her safe in some way, but it kept her turned away. It kept her closed. What I hope for you is that you learn how to unfurl, that you will open, not curved around your heart, but taking the risk to open, to be vulnerable, not knowing what is to come, but to learn to greet it with open arms." As I write you this letter, I find that I am seeing your faces in my mind. I realize how much for me the strength I need to do this work, to live on the growing edge, uncovering who I am, is grounded in knowing that I belong. I belong here with all of you, and you do too. We gather certain of only one thing, that we are human, knowing we contain multitudes and contradictions, complex beings with the power to harm and to heal, with a fierce belief in the magic that can happen when we come together. It's a mix of forgiveness, love, wonder, and a whole lot of grace. It doesn't always make sense. It doesn't always work. We stumble, we come back together again with all the courage we can muster. The creation of community is really a remarkable thing, isn't it? A place where we are welcomed in with all our flawed abundance and held in love as we work at being human, at finding our growing edge, where others will support us in the face of what scares us and will remind us again and again that we are not alone. This is getting quite long for a letter, and I promise I'm going to wrap it up soon. One more poem, though, before I do. This one is from David White. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in, the step you don't want to take. Start with the ground you know, the pale ground beneath your feet, your own way to begin the conversation. Start with your own question. Give up on other people's questions. Don't let them smother something simple. To hear another's voice, follow your own voice. Wait until that voice becomes an intimate, private ear that can really listen to another. Start right now. Take a small step, a step you call your own. Don't follow someone else's heroics. Be humble and focused. Start close in. Don't mistake that other for your own. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in, the step you don't want to take. So in the days ahead, when the shadows are strong and you question whether or not you can continue on this path of uncovering who you are, of living on your growing edge, facing the fear and learning to stay. Just stay. Start close in. Don't think too far down that road. Listen for your own voice and take one small step. And remember, dear friend, that here you belong. Here we know that you are heartbreak and joy. You are tragedy and triumph. You are grit and grace. And you are enough. You carry the stars and the galaxies within you. Rest. Breathe. Hold your people close. And remember, whatever comes, you are and always will be so very much enough. All my love, always.
Each week, we gather with hearts that are heavy with sorrow and hearts filled with joy. We share these here in community, knowing we are held in love. This week, we light a candle for Lisa West, who asks us to keep in mind her friend, an artist, an author, who is in the midst of a 2.5-month solitary confinement at Green Bay Correctional Institution. We light a candle of remembrance for Kelly and Mayor Lee Clifton, longtime members of this congregation. A celebration of both their lives will be held September 25th at 11 a.m. at Lake Farm Park. You may find more information about the service in the red floors. Ann Gillespie and family share the passing of their beloved dog, Mella. Always wagging her tail and the truest of friends, she filled their lives with love and companionship. She lived a good life, and they will miss her so. We light a candle for those among us and our friends and neighbors who observed Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement, this past week. Likewise, we wish you a Chag Sameach as the festival of Sukkot begins tomorrow, the next celebration in this, the busiest season of the Jewish calendar. Finally, we light one last candle for all the joys and all the sorrows that live within the sanctuaries of our hearts. May they each be held gently in gratitude, in love, and in hope.
There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love.
This is closing hymn number 1015, I Know I Can. We will be singing verses 1, 2, and 4. Though days be dark with storms and burdens weigh my heart, though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. When sorrow heals my soul and burdens make me strong, though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. And though the journey's long, the destination is near. Though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on.
As so much closed, we were opened. Normal was taken, but it was also turned inside out. Very little is inevitable. Most of it is a choice. This is what we have learned. So now the question comes, do we really want to go back? We can weave a new world, friends. The straw can be spun into gold. A door has swung wide with possibility trying to pull us through. So may today mark our first step, and may it be one we take side by side. Blessed be. and go in peace.
Amen.